Let's start with just a few minutes of sitting quietly, settle down our mind, get into a ready state for the class. So let your body relax. And let your awareness come into this present place and present moment. Being aware of your body, being aware of your breathing, flowing in and flowing out. And let go of other thoughts. Decide that for this next hour, you will just keep your mind, your awareness in the present. On this class, what we are doing here. Really try your best not to let your mind go elsewhere, other places, other times. And generate a positive, altruistic intention or motivation for being part of this class. So you all do have a lot of kindness and compassion and altruism, wanting to help other people, wanting to help your country, wanting to help the world, to do as much as you can to bring greater peace and happiness and relieve suffering. So bring those kind of thoughts or feelings into your mind, into your heart right now. And feel the wish that you will learn something during this 1 hour that will help you to help not only yourself, but also your family, your friends, your relatives, your patients, and as many other people and beings as possible. You'll be able to bring them greater peace and happiness and help them have less suffering. So we have been looking at the first two of the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha taught, and that are a summary of his message and his teaching. So we spent some time looking at the first Noble Truth, dukkha, or suffering, the different types of suffering there are. And then we started looking at the causes of suffering, which are mainly karma and afflictions, mainly afflictions or disturbing states of mind or delusions. There's different terms for these. So today we're going to start looking at anger. So this is probably one of the most harmful, destructive, afflictive mental states. It comes into people's minds and they become like crazy with anger, and then they can do a lot of destructive things, even kill many people, um, cause terror, and yeah, lots of suffering, lots of problems. But it also disturbs our own mind. Whenever anger is there, it makes our own mind disturbed and unpeaceful. So we're in your book on page 22. That's where we have the section on anger. And we won't have time to go through all the words in the book. I'm hoping that you did read them already. Um, so I'll just kind of focus on some of the main parts. So first, there's a description of anger in the box. But I think most people do recognize anger. It's something we all do experience at least sometimes. But what we may not always realize is how anger causes us to see things in a mistaken way, like in an exaggerated way. Anger arises towards a person. Usually it's a person. We sometimes get angry at machines or devices or things that aren't working the way we want them to. But most of the time it's towards other people or other beings. And so it starts with an unpleasant feeling. Yeah, so we have some unpleasant feeling in our mind towards that person. And then what happens is the mind exaggerates the unpleasantness of the person, their qualities, so that they come to they seem to be worse than they really are, even 100% bad and uh, unattractive and having no good qualities at all. And then our mind just tends to believe in that, believe the person really is like that, really is bad and horrible and awful. So it's good to recognize that. It's subtle, it's happening just kind of subtly, automatically in our mind. But it's good to try to observe your mind and notice that that's what happens when you get angry at somebody. And then, in the worst case, when anger arises towards someone, there's the wish to do something harmful. We want to harm the person, either through our speech, we might want to say hurtful words to the person, or physically do something harmful to them. And that's why people, kill or assault uh, others. And even if we don't act it out in those ways, we might still have thoughts of wanting to harm, or wishing that harm will come to the person, wishing the person will meet with harm. So it may not always be that bad. Sometimes we might just have feelings of irritation or aversion or impatience, and we may not feel like doing something directly harmful, but it's still that disturbed state of mind towards another person. It's kind of the opposite of love, loving kindness and compassion. And we all know what that's like, because anger can even arise towards those that we do love. People that normally you do love and care about, like your own children, your spouse or partner, your parents, and so on. Even people we normally feel love for, anger can come up in our mind. And at that moment, when we have anger towards another person, there's no love. Love is gone. It can come back, of course. The anger can go away and the love can come back. But at the same moment that we have anger, it's impossible to have love for that same person. So it's just like the total opposite of love. Love is such a beautiful um, emotion for us and also for others. We treat others in a very nice way when we have love for them. But anger is just like the total opposite of that. So in Buddhism, the general explanation in Buddhism is that anger is something negative, harmful, destructive, and it's something if those of us who want to follow the Buddhist path, it's something we have to get rid of, we have to eliminate. Although that's not something we can do quickly, easily. It takes time. But if we do want to follow the path, the Buddhist path, and attain the higher states of liberation and enlightenment, anger is an obstacle to attaining those. We cannot attain those states as long as we still have anger in our mind. And so, from the Buddhist point of view, it's something we have to overcome. But then, in contemporary, in the world, in contemporary society, there's a lot of discussion about how anger may not always be destructive, because it can, like when we get angry about injustice or about abuse, about, harmful things that people are doing to other people, then is that really a bad thing? Because it can motivate people. When you get angry over injustice, you feel motivated to bring about an end to injustice and help those who are being abused and so on. And so in your book, there's a note from this book called Beyond Religion. It's a book by the Dalai Lama. And there he says, anger is not always destructive. For example, in some situations, strong compassion may give rise to an equally strong sense of outrage, that is, anger, about an injustice. Again, feeling angry can, in the short term, make our minds more focused and give us an extra burst of energy and determination. In these ways, anger can, in certain situations, make us more effective in getting things done and in obtaining what we rightly seek. However, when anger extends beyond this practical function, most of the energy it brings is not helpful at all. Since all of us have probably at one time or another been on the receiving end of other people's anger, we all have experience of its unpleasant consequences. And so, this is unusual. What the Dalai Lama is saying here is kind of not the traditional explanation of anger, but I think it's because he does have a lot of discussions with scientists and Western professors and teachers and all kinds of people. And so they usually ask this kind of question. Well, what about getting angry over injustice? Some people are being treated unjustly and you're angry about that. And, is that really wrong? Is that really bad? And so he does make this distinction. And I have another little book here. It's called The Dalai Lama on What Matters Most. It's written by a Japanese journalist, and he's also a cultural anthropologist. His name is Noriyuki Ueda. And so he had some conversations with the Dalai Lama about various things, including anger. And so I'll just read a little bit from here. So the Dalai Lama says, when faced with economic or any other kind of injustice, It is totally wrong for a religious person to remain indifferent. Religious people must struggle to solve these problems. I think they were having discussion about what's called liberation theology in Latin America, South America, where there's a lot of corruption, a lot of injustice. And sometimes the religious people, the Catholic priests and nuns and so forth, get involved in activism. And this is sort of controversial because some people think, oh, religious people, they shouldn't be involved in that kind of thing. They shouldn't be involved in politics. They should just stay in the church and pray. And so there's some people who have that point of view, and other people who say, no, they should try to help the people if the people are suffering. We have the same kind of conversation in Buddhism as well. There's also those 2 points of view that if you're a Buddhist monk or a Buddhist nun, you should just meditate and you shouldn't get involved in politics. Some people think that way, but other people don't. And they do get involved in activism. Of course, not in a violent way, not doing anything harmful, but just trying to help bring about positive changes for people. So then the Dalai Lama goes on. So he's saying very clearly, religious people should struggle to solve problems and not just remain indifferent. So then he goes on to say, here the issue is how to deal with anger. There are 2 types of anger. One type arises out of compassion. That kind of anger is useful. Anger that is motivated by compassion or a desire to correct social injustice and does not seek to harm the other person is a good anger that is worth having. For example, a good parent, out of concern for a child's behavior, may use harsh words or even strike the child. He may be angry, but there's no trace of any desire to hurt him. So he's giving the example of parents. All of you are parents, so you know that sometimes your children misbehave. They don't do what you ask them to do. They do opposite to what you ask them to do. And sometimes you have to discipline them, raise your voice, maybe even give them some punishment. But there's some anger there, but it's not because you want to harm your child. It's actually because you want to benefit them. You want them to grow up with good habits and learn, the right way of doing things and so on. So your deepest desire is to benefit your child rather than harm your child. So in a similar way, if there's something going on in a country, one group of people is harming another group of people, we feel concern, compassion for those who are being harmed. And as a Buddhist, we would also feel compassion for the ones who are doing the harm, who are acting in harmful ways, because we understand, well, they're harming themselves as well. They're creating bad karma. They're going to suffer in the future because of what they're doing. And so we want to bring an end to this situation. We want to stop this harmful behavior. So that's the basis of this kind of anger that the Dalai Lama is talking about. It's kind of a good kind of anger. But then the tricky thing is, if we just let our mind get caught up in anger, then it makes our mind not very clear and rational. So we may act in ways that are irrational and harmful and even do more harm than good. And so ideally, the ideal thing is to calm down our mind, calm down our anger, and restore our mind to, a more calm, equanimous, even-minded, balanced state so that we can think clearly and be able to see the situation in a way that enables us to see what is the best way to act, what is the best thing to do. Does that make sense? Because just acting out of anger, you might do things that will just make things worse. I think I was just thinking, I've heard it similar in martial arts. I haven't studied martial arts, but I've heard about it. And they say that, yeah, ideally, a martial artist needs to keep their mind calm and not angry. If you get angry, you're not going to be very effective, in fighting your opponent, defending yourself, and so on. So you need to keep your mind, you know, calm and not caught up in anger. And so, yeah. So the Dalai Lama then makes this distinction between different kinds of anger. One kind of anger that is based on compassion, and that comes up when there's injustice, corruption. Some people are being harmed, other people are doing harm, and so on. And we want to bring about a change. We want to correct this situation. The other kind of anger arises mainly based on our own ego, like when someone insults us, mistreats us, treats us a way we don't want to be treated. So it's usually related to our own sense of self, I, me, um, and that kind of anger, from the Buddhist point of view, is the one that isn't beneficial at all, and that we need to tame. And so it's good to look at how we can work with our anger, how we can deal with our anger and calm down our anger, because we need to do that, whether it's situations related to our own ego, the unhelpful kind of anger, or situations where we're angry on behalf of others, the compassionate kind of anger. We still have to learn how to calm down our mind, calm down the anger, so that we can act wisely and skillfully in the situation rather than just, reacting with anger, which could lead to more problems and creating bad karma. So when we act out of anger, our actions are motivated by anger, then the karma we create is negative karma, bad karma, and that will bring suffering in the future. So we need to learn how to act. Ideally, it's not easy to do, but act without anger. So for antidotes to anger, the first one on the list is to think about the faults and disadvantages of anger, to become convinced that it is something harmful rather than helpful, and therefore not something you want to indulge in, something you want to act out. So I just mentioned how karmically, in terms of karma, anger leads to suffering, problems in the future. That may be difficult to believe. We can't see the future. But if we just look at the immediate effects of anger, how it affects our own body and mind, like when we're angry, how do we feel in our body? We probably don't feel very good. We probably feel tense. And I've heard there's also research that shows the harmful effects of anger on our health. People who are chronically angry have shorter lives, more health problems, especially heart disease. It can lead to heart disease and maybe cancer as well. So there's actual scientific proof of the harmful effects of anger on our body and our health. And then there's our mind. What is our state of mind like when we're angry? Is that a pleasant, calm, peaceful state of mind? Can we think clearly? Can we make intelligent, rational decisions? Are we able to do our work well? So if we look at those results of anger that happen immediately, and we can see them for ourselves, I think we'll recognize it's not a helpful state of mind. And then when we get angry and act out our anger, how that affects other people around us, or even our loved ones, family and friends, and so on. We might hurt them when we're angry, and then we feel regret about that. And also, they feel hurt. They may lose trust in us. And so it really creates a lot of problems, a lot of suffering. So that's one thing that's helpful to do, is to just contemplate the effects of anger, to see that it's not a desirable, helpful state of mind, but it's actually a harmful one. Does that make sense to all of you? Do you have any questions about that or comments? I mean, I'm just going through these quickly, but in your meditation on Wednesday, um, we'll be doing a meditation on some of these antidotes to anger. So there you have a little more time to contemplate. So the second of the antidotes is to cultivate loving kindness. So that's like the opposite of anger, as I mentioned earlier. And so if we can increase loving kindness, and not just to a limited number of people, like our immediate family and friends, but more and more people, we can just make that our natural state of mind towards other people and beings, then there's less chance of getting angry at them. We'll be able to have more patience, more kindness towards them. Even if they misbehave, we'll still be able to feel positive feelings towards them. So the more we can have loving kindness, then the less chance that we'll get angry at them. Not completely, but it definitely helps, because you can still, even if you love somebody, like your children, you feel a lot of love for them, but you can still get angry at them, right? So it doesn't completely stop anger, but it can help. It can help to have less anger. And even if you do get angry, it won't last as long. Because if you already have a strong feeling of love for that person, then that will come up and replace the anger. And then the third antidote is remember karma, cause and effect. So it depends on whether or not you do believe in karma. If you have confidence, belief in karma, but somebody who does, for example, in Buddhism, most of us do believe in karma, and the teachings of the Buddha say that if we get angry and then act out our anger, then that creates the karma to suffer in the future, to experience suffering in the future. And so if you believe that, if you accept that, then that can be a way to stop yourself from getting angry. So even in a situation where maybe somebody's harming you and you feel angry towards that person, but if you remember karma, what kind of karma will I create if I retaliate, act out my anger towards this person? So I might feel sort of good because, I got back at that person. I gave them what they deserved. But what will happen to me in the future, later on? What will happen as a result of getting angry? So if we believe that, we'd be creating bad karma and suffer in the future, then we would not want to act out our anger. But another point about karma is, according to Buddhism, when we are harmed by somebody else, when somebody harms us, is the result of our own karma from the past. The reason that this is happening to me is because I created karma in the past to have this experience. So that's usually not something we can remember directly. Most people can't remember their past and what they did, although we can. We, sometimes in this very lifetime, we might be able to remember that we did something hurtful to that person in the past. So then it makes sense that they would have this anger towards us and want to do something harmful to us. But maybe we haven't, if it's a complete stranger, we never met them before. We can't remember ever doing anything harmful to this person in this lifetime. But Buddhism would say, well, in a past life, you probably harmed that person. And that's why there's karma to experience this harm now. So this can be difficult to believe. Like I say, it's very much part of the Buddha's teachings. Karma is a very, very central point in the Buddha's teachings. And so people who believe in Buddha, I'm going to fix my video, it got fuzzy again. People who believe in the Buddha will accept his teachings on karma. But it's also said that when one's own mind is developed, when you develop your mind and you gain more realizations, that you yourself can remember your own past lives, and you can see the karma you created in the past, which is now bringing about this experience in the present. So it is something that can be verified by one's own experience with higher states of mind, higher realizations. So that is something that could be helpful. I was once, people are usually pretty nice to me, but sometimes I have difficulty with people. So there was this one person, actually another nun, and at a certain point in time, she just got really angry at me, and we were both attending teachings in Dharamsala. We were going to the Dalai Lama's teachings, and she was sitting right behind me. And she would sometimes, play these tricks on me, or, we'd meet somewhere and she'd say something kind of nasty and hurtful. It seemed like she really wanted to hurt me, really wanted to make me upset. And it was quite painful. And I did get angry. I couldn't help but get angry at this treatment. And at one point, like early on, she said that she accused me of something, which I didn't think was true. And then I spoke back to her and I said, well, it's true for you as well, something like that. And I immediately regretted that I retaliated like that. I didn't feel good about that. And it certainly didn't help. It just made her more angry. So I decided, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm just going to put up with her treatment of me and not respond. But I was trying these different methods for dealing with anger. And one of the things that I did find very helpful was to thinking about karma. And I could think of things in our relationship that I had done that probably did trigger off her anger. It's not that I really wanted to hurt her. I was just not very skillful in the way I spoke to her. So I could see things in this lifetime that I did to her to make her angry. But I also remembered when I was a child in my family, and I had several younger siblings, and sometimes I was really nasty to them. I feel very bad about that. But when you're a child, you do all kinds of things. So I could remember, oh yeah, I was like this to my younger sister and my younger brother, and then I thought, oh, now I know what it's like to be treated that way. Now I am receiving that kind of treatment. And it's so painful. It's really painful. And I just really felt this strong wish from the depths of my heart that I never want to treat anyone like that again. I never want to say hurtful things or do hurtful things to anybody. So I made this kind of promise, this commitment that from this moment on, I am never again going to treat anybody in a nasty way, in an unkind way. So, in that sense, that experience was very helpful for me to come to that strong determination to never, ever, ever again do anything hurtful to anybody because of knowing what it's like to be on the receiving end of that. And I really felt strongly, I don't ever want to make anyone go through this kind of experience. I don't want to make anyone suffer like this. So for me, thinking in terms of karma, karma from the past leading to experiences we have now, and then things we do now leading to more experiences in the future. It can lead to, yeah, this kind of determination to only create good karma and not create any more bad karma. So that's just an illustration of how thinking in terms of karma can help us deal with anger. And then number 5 is consider that the person you are angry at is like a mirror. So the idea here is that this might be more appropriate in situations where we feel critical or judgmental towards somebody. And I was once reading a Buddhist book and I came across this sentence that said, we would not see faults in others if we didn't have faults in oneself. And for me, that was just kind of like a slap in the face. It's like, wow, because my mind tends to be very critical and I see lots of faults in other people. And so then I thought, oh, does that mean I have all those faults myself? So I started investigating that. Uh, and I realized, yes, it is true. The things that I see in other people that I don't like, that I get angry at, or I just think, have critical, judgmental feelings about, they are things that I have in my own self. And um, so this could be with regard to things that people do. But when you see somebody doing something that you don't like or that you think is wrong, if you ask yourself, have I ever done that? Yeah, you might recognize that you have. It is something you do. But it could also be with regard to qualities, attitudes they have, mm, personality traits that they have, being greedy, for example, or being selfish or short tempered, whatever you notice about another person. If you look back in yourself and say, well, do I have that in myself? Is that something I have? Then there's a good chance you'll recognize that you do. But it could be something you don't fully acknowledge. It might be something suppressed or denied or ignored or whatever. But I mean the point. I mean, I'm sure you know this because it's part of Western psychology too, especially I think Jungian psychology, which talks about the shadow and how we tend to project our shadow onto others. So the parts of ourself we don't like and don't accept, we can project those onto others. And in the case of the negative things we don't like about ourselves, when we see them in others, we react with anger, aversion, criticalness, and so forth. And so this is a very helpful thing to do when feeling angry or critical. And when you do discover in yourself this thing you are angry at in the other person, the solution is to change your attitude instead of rejecting and, feeling ashamed of that in yourself, to accept it, to develop an attitude of acceptance that that is there, that is part of me, and I accept it. And I know I can change. Like in Buddhism, say, well, we can change ourselves. We don't have to remain that way. If we're selfish, for example, we can learn to be less selfish, more unselfish. So I can change that part of myself, but I have to start by accepting it. I have to first accept it and then work on changing it. So if we can become more accepting of those things in ourselves, then when we see them in other people, we'll be less likely to be angry, critical, and so on, and be able to have more acceptance of them and more compassion for them. So that may take time, probably will take time, especially with really deep things in ourselves. But it's a very, very helpful method for dealing with anger and criticalness. Does that make sense?
I want to ask.
Hi.
Hi. I want to ask about anger towards ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, Buddhism doesn't normally talk about that, but it is very much a topic in contemporary, well, especially Buddhism in the West, because many, many Western people do have this problem of self-hatred or anger or criticalness towards oneself. And it doesn't seem to be much of a problem for Tibetans. um, one of the earliest Buddhist teachers to start studying with Tibetan Lamas, Alan Wallace. You may have heard of Alan Wallace. He's kind of a well-known teacher. And he was a monk living in Dharamsala in the early 70s. And he said he was once talking with one of his Tibetan teachers, and this Lama made the comment. He said, "We are always seeing faults in other people, but we never see faults in ourselves." And Alan said, "That's not true. I'm always criticizing myself." And the Lama said, "No, like nobody does that." So Alan was like, huh? So it may be true that Tibetan culture, Tibetan society is like that people don't criticize themselves or hate themselves. The Dalai Lama also said when he heard people talking about self-hatred, Western people talking about self-hatred, he was like, what? What are you talking about? And it was like a new concept to him. And so it doesn't seem to be much of a problem among Tibetans, but it's definitely a big problem in the West. And so now more Tibetan lamas are talking about it and addressing it. And the Dalai Lama sometimes says, we have to have compassion for ourselves. If we don't have compassion for ourselves, we won't be able to have it for others. And so they are aware of it as a problem. And yes, it is something, if we do notice ourselves having self-hatred, self-anger, self-criticalness, judgmentalness, that is a delusion. Hating ourselves is just as bad as hating other people. So definitely it's not something we should do. So we should apply antidotes to anger at ourselves, such as just recognizing that it doesn't help, it's harmful, and so on. So, but I have this problem. I had this problem my whole life, and I'm still working on it. I still have it. It's so deep and so habitual that it's hard to stop. but at least to become aware of it, become aware of when it's happening, and not indulge in it, not feed it, not let your mind continue with that habit. And then, we have meditations on compassion and love. So use those meditations towards yourself. Have compassion for yourself and love for yourself, and so on. There's one American woman, she's a psychologist, Kristen Neff, who spent 10 years doing research on self-compassion. And she wrote a book about it. She has a website about it. So she's, trying hard to help people have more compassion for themselves. And there's also, a few other psychologists, I think in England, who have developed a type of therapy based on compassion based or compassion focused therapy. I forget what it's called. So yeah, and you probably see it in your patients as well. Self anger, self hatred. Yeah, so it's so harmful, it's so destructive. Yeah, because if we don't love ourselves, if we don't have kindness and compassion for ourselves, how can we really feel love and compassion for others? We'll be just as kind of negative towards them as we are towards ourselves. Although I have to say, there's a book called A Fearless Heart by Thupten Jinpa. Thupten Jinpa is a Tibetan who's quite a scholar. Oh, you have it in Hebrew, isn't it? I think. No. Oh, sorry. No, I was teaching it recently in France. Yeah, recently they translated it into French, and so I was teaching it to a group of people in Paris, and so they were really happy because they had the book in French, maybe not in Hebrew yet. But anyway, it's a wonderful book, and it's all about a kind of compassion-based, compassion training program that was developed at Stanford University and has, taken off and is being taught elsewhere as well. Anyway, so in that book, he does mention that there are people who can be very compassionate for others, people working in healthcare, for example, but still lacking compassion for themselves. So it is possible to have compassion for others, even if you don't have it for yourself, but it will be limited. Your ability to have compassion for others will be limited, as long as you're still having anger and hatred and criticalness towards yourself. So if we really want to have compassion for others and really do the best for others, this is something we need to overcome. Any other questions? Oh yeah, number 4. Oh, I skipped number 4. How did that happen? Actually, number 4 is a really important one. This is putting yourself in the other person's shoes. You probably have an expression like that in Hebrew.
We are dealing with this point 7 years at least.
Sorry, what?
We are dealing with this point for 7 years.
At least.
Oh.
At least.
Oh, I see. So you mean in the human spirit program?
Learning.
Yeah. This is being taught. Yeah. Understanding other, yeah. So you're probably very familiar with this. But ordinary people, people who aren't trained like you are, don't normally think this way. It isn't something kind of instinctive or intuitive. And so it is really helpful to try to understand the other person's point of view. Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this a lot as well. Just understanding, bring understanding to the situation. Try to understand the other person and how they are feeling, how they are thinking, what's going on with them. And one thing we'll discover is that they are suffering. Like I mentioned that story where this other nun was being nasty to me. So when I thought about what's going on with her, it was so clear that she was suffering. I mean, when people behave in a nasty way, they're not happy. Their mind isn't calm and peaceful and happy and full of love and compassion. Their mind is like tortured. They have like a tortured state of mind, tortured by their delusions, their anger, their pain, their suffering. So it's just so obvious, right? That the person is suffering. And when you can understand that, then there's a chance your mind will change so that instead of being angry at them, you want to help them. Because it was so clear that this person needs more help than I do. This person is suffering more than I am. And so that really helped me to turn my mind around and not want to retaliate, make her more unhappy, and instead want to help her. So that's a very, very helpful method, is just understanding the other person's point of view. And then, trying to generate loving kindness and compassion. It may not always be possible to help the other person if they're really angry at you. They don't want to listen to you. They don't want to cooperate with you. They don't want to have anything to do with you. They just want to hurt you. But I mean, in the case of this one nun, after some time, eventually she did calm down and apologize. She apologized for the way she behaved. She realized, that she was behaving really badly and felt a lot of regret. So, and then again, thinking in terms of karma, if you believe in karma and you're looking at what the person is doing, how they're behaving, and you understand they're creating negative karma, they're going to suffer in the future as a result of what they're doing. So that can really help to change your mind. I heard a story of one Tibetan geshe who was meditating on Mao Zedong and what the kind of karma that Mao Zedong had created in his life. He was responsible for, I forget how many deaths, hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of people died as a result of Mao Zedong. Mao? Mao? Late leader of China. Yeah, so he was responsible for so many deaths, maybe even more than Hitler, possible. Maybe he killed even more people than Hitler. So this one geshe was contemplating, the karma that man created and the suffering he will experience as a result of that. And he would just cry. He cried with compassion for for Mao, for Mao Zedong. Just thinking about his suffering. So that's another helpful technique. So, like I say, on Wednesday, there'll be a meditation. I've already recorded it the other day because I have to do something else this afternoon. So on Wednesday, you'll have a chance to meditate on some of these points. And then if you have further questions, you can send them to me and I'll try to answer them next week. Yeah, just quickly, number 6 is about keeping our mind happy, because if our mind becomes unhappy, dissatisfied, and so on, then we're more likely to get angry. It's easier to get angry when your mind is unhappy. So try to keep your mind happy and positive, and then there's less chance of getting angry. So that comes from Shantideva. Shantideva, the great Indian master, he talks about that one. So I found that one really helpful. Don't let your mind get grumpy and depressed and dissatisfied. Otherwise, you'll have more anger. Stay happy. So that's a good note to end on. Yeah. So yeah, if you have questions or comments, you can email me. You have my email address, and I can bring them up in the next class. And I'll send you an email anyway with the reading for the next class. Next class, we'll move on to the next delusion, which is attachment. We'll talk about attachment next week. Thank you, and let's just take a moment to make a mental dedication of this positive energy we created during this class, starting off with a good motivation, an altruistic motivation, and then with that motivation, listening and thinking about and talking about these points. So let's share this positive energy with others, all living beings, and may it help all living beings be free of their anger, their hatred, and all other disturbing thoughts and emotions that cause them so much suffering, and also become the cause of suffering for others when they act out these disturbing emotions. Okay, thank you.